thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. Download the app today.
This is Up for a Chat with your hosts, Cyndi O'Meara and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat, talking about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Cyndi O'Meara.
And I'm Kim Morrison. What an honour and a treat to have this special human back on our show, the amazing Dr. Chadi Nabhan, who we did actually have back on the show, episode number 378, talking all about his book, Toxic Exposure. And we have been dying to get him back on to talk about his latest book, The Cancer Journey. Welcome to the show, gorgeous Chad.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time and inviting me to come back. It must have meant I did not mess up the first time around.
I don't think you could mess up at all. We absolutely love your approach to health and wellness. Anyone can go back and listen to that beautiful podcast where we talk about who you are and what made you come into this line of work. But I want to jump straight in. What inspired you to write this latest book, The Cancer Journey? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Really what inspired me are patients. When you take care of patients for many years, and I've done that for 2 decades, you realize that no one is immune from being unhealthy and getting sick. And being diagnosed with cancer is life-altering. Every illness is life-altering, but whenever you hear the word cancer, what you think about is the end and all of these things. And I wanted to really write a book for patients and families and people who are affected by this disease. And I noticed that whatever book that you pick up in a bookstore is very textbookish type of thing. I wanted to write something by telling stories. So I basically leveraged my ability to tell stories to illustrate and simplify everything about cancer from A to Z. The other thing that I've noticed when you look at other books, there are a lot of books about one specific type of cancer: breast cancer, prostate cancer, colon cancer, and that's fine. But I wanted to talk about cancer in general, as an entity, as a disease, and talk about what is cancer, what possibly causes it, and things of that nature. So basically, what inspired me is 2 things. Number one, the patients that we care for and we care about, that they unfortunately embark on a journey that was not expected. So they need guidance, help. And if I can provide that help by storytelling and explaining everything pertaining to cancer, I would like to do that. And number 2 is I believe there's not a lot of guidance out there to help patients, despite how much there is, right? You go to Google, you do all of these things, but there's still a lot of confusion. So I wanted to minimize the confusion as much as I can. Took me 3 years to write, but I'm very happy that it's coming out and very proud of it.
Chadi, it's interesting. I rang my neighbour the other day, just a week ago. So this is on my farm, and they have the 100 acres next to mine, and we actually purchased from them 10 years ago, and so they owned quite a bit. And I just said, "Oh, can we come down and swim in the creek, because their creek's a little bit bigger than ours, and we can get right in?" And she said, "Sure, Cyndi, that'd be fine." I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "No, I've just been diagnosed with breast cancer." And it's interesting because my son and I both spoke about it, and our land used to be sprayed with glyphosate. Like he loves glyphosate. And I know I started to think, is it because he's spraying with the glyphosate, which I know is one of your, that's what your last book was about, was what glyphosate and cancer and the trials that were happening. And my son and I said, is it because he sprays with it, he comes home with it on his clothes because it's water soluble, she washes it, she's exposed to it in every way, And so we ask those questions. And I know that this isn't exactly what this book is about, but I hear this all the time. We've just had another friend die at 30 from pancreatic cancer. It just seems to be just huge at the moment. So, number one, is there an increase in cancer that's happening? Have you noticed that? And number two, do you think it's more aggressive than it's ever been before? So, yeah, I just wanted to give you that.
Yeah. First of all, I'm really sorry about your friends and relatives. It's very unfortunate, and I think that just to comment on these two stories, I do think it's important to investigate a lot of these things. It is not normal for a 30-year-old person to die of pancreas cancer, but obviously there's probably more to the story. We just don't know. And I think it's important to at least ask the question and try to provide answers, because family members and relatives want answers. Now, sometimes we don't have the answers, but what's worse than not having the answers is not trying to find the answers. And I'm a big believer that we at least should ask and try to answer. In terms of your question as to whether there's increase in the incidence of cancer, I don't have the statistics for every single country. In the United States, where I live, there has been some increase in the number of new cases of cancer diagnosed every year in the United States. We're approaching about 2 million new cancer cases a year in the United States. Having said that, it's not really clear why that increase is. So it could be a multitude of factors. You certainly could add screening and early diagnosis. If you screen and look for cancers, you probably will find cancers. So the more you screen for it, but whether if you're doing a PSA for prostate, mammograms for breast, or colonoscopies for colon, you could find these. So it increases the incidence. It could be the environmental factors that you're alluding to. It's absolutely plausible and possible. There's a lot of things that are actually ongoing. So I do believe there has been an increase in the incidence of cancer. And you know my opinion about glyphosate. I think glyphosate is awful. I think it's just terrible. I don't know whether it is linked to breast cancer per se or every single cancer, but I think when you find something that is that bad, in my opinion, it is fair to say, why do we need it? But, that ship has sailed a little bit in the US. I'm hoping that things will change at some point, but I just don't know how successful we're going to be against large corporates such as Monsanto.
Did you hear what happened in Australia, Chadi, by the way? It's unbelievable that they're saying in America it's linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and in Australia they said, no, sorry. And it got thrown out in court. It's just
courts are courts. Look, it's having been in the court myself and seeing lawyers and trials and jury, there's a lot more to the court system than just facts, honestly. There are two things I wrote in my previous book that shocked me. The two things that most shocked me the most were, one, that strategy trumps facts. If you are a smart lawyer and you have a good strategy and you know how to win the jury to your side, you probably could win. Number two was the fact that the judge decides what should be presented to the jury and what should be withheld from the jury. So it's always interesting because as a citizen, I was thinking, well, just show them everything and let them decide. But it's not how it works. Both sides have to debate what we can show them and what we can't show them. I want to go back to the other question, whether the cancer is more aggressive or not. It's tough to answer because every cancer is different. So every disease is different. I do think we are seeing more cancer in younger people. I really do. And it could be screening, but I am seeing there's a lot of interest in the US right now from investigators and physicians to study cancers that occur in people younger than 50, for example, or even younger than 40. How much of this are particular mutations and genes that get thrown off, but what causes them to become like this? I don't like the bad luck theory. There are people here, sometimes they say it's bad luck. Now, Could this be bad? Could it be bad luck in certain situations? Absolutely. I mean, no. Unfortunately, we're not immortal. We're not going to live forever. I mean, that's it is what it is. We understand that, and nobody is saying that we're going to live forever. But I just want us to recognize that we should try to always ask questions and try to provide answers to the people that need the most.
Can I ask a question just before we go more into the detail of the book and all the information? Would you mind explaining to us exactly what cancer is? Like, I know that we have approximately, forgive me if I'm wrong, 50 trillion cells. Those cells all have their own powerhouse, their energy house. They have nutrients in, waste out. They all operate individually. And then together we have beautiful organs and all sorts of things that occur symbiotically. But when a cancer strikes, I'm just curious to understand, what's the difference between a breast cancer, a prostate cancer, a cervical cancer, a brain cancer, like all of these cancers, and what exactly is it? Is it one cell that then mutates? Could you just give us a little bit of the science in behind what cancer is and what it does?
My light is starting to work, so I tell you, Kim, the first chapter in the book, chapter 1, literally is what is cancer and what causes it. So for listeners, we did not rehearse this. But literally, as I was writing this, I thought this must be chapter 1 because everybody want to ask this. So of course, I'm not going to read you the whole chapter because, but I'm going to try to simplify it. Look, and this is exactly what I wrote is the way I'm going to explain it to you because that's how we should explain things to people. Every organ in our body, when you look, every organ in our body, whether it's your eye, your hair, your skin, your everything, is composed of cells. Cells basically compose every single organ in our body. And these cells grow usually and die, and other cells grow to replace the dying cells. It's just a normal cycle. Think almost of it, just to simplify it. Let's say you sit in the sun and you get skin burn, and then the skin peels and you just have replaced skin. I mean, we have cells that die and cells that live. That happens all the time. Something happens where the cells don't die like they're supposed to die, or they grow in a very unnatural way. That's what happens. So, and that could occur in any organ. So we have all of these organs in our bodies. We have all of these cells in our bodies. Usually the cells die and you get newer cells. But for whatever reason, these cells stop dying, so they don't die anymore, and they continue to grow. So it's either lack of death, natural death of the cells, or continuous growth of the cells, or a combination of both. And that leads to tumors that often are malignant and cancerous, because there are some benign tumors. And that could occur in any organ: breast, colon, ovary, uterus, anywhere, prostate. So think of the the organ as a building, and this building is composed of bricks. These bricks age after a while and gets replaced by other bricks. So suddenly these bricks don't die anymore, and you just keep growing and all of that. So that's really what cancer is: overgrowth of cells in an unnatural way, or the lack of normal death of these cells. And because we have cells in every single organ, cancer could occur in any organ in our body, and literally any organ in our body. That's what happens. The other thing about cancer is because it grows and multiplies, it could metastasize and go in other locations. And it does that either through blood vessels, so it could go to distant organs, or through the lymph channels, where it could go to the lymph nodes in the surrounding organs. So, hopefully this simplifies things. We have organs. These organs have cells. And because these cells could multiply and stop dying, cancer could develop in any organ in our body, literally any organ. And normally, we call the cancer based on the organ that it started at. So if the cancer cells started growing and multiplying in the breast, we call it breast cancer. If it's in the pancreas, we call it pancreas cancer. It is evolving a little bit. What is happening right now is we understand the genetic mutation that is leading to the development of cancer, and sometimes that genetic driver could be the same despite the differences in organs. So you could see the same genetic driver in two different cancers that originate from in two different organs. So some people are saying, well, does it matter where it's coming from if we know the genetic driver behind it? I think it does, and I'll explain to you why later on.
Why have I never heard of heart cancer?
Heart cancer or heart cancer? No, there is. There is. We don't call it heart. Yeah, we don't call it heart cancer. So it's again. So there's a cancer called myxoma, which is basically it occurs on certain areas of the heart. There are sometimes the certain cells of the heart could be affected by particular cancer cells, and then patients develop fluid around the heart. We call that pericardial effusion. That fluid around the heart is coming from other cells. It is very, very rare that the cancer starts in the heart, as an example, but it does happen. We have seen it.
Yeah, just hadn't. You were saying every organ, and I like going.
Every organ. I mean, like literally, when we talk head and neck cancer, the entire head and neck area could everywhere, right? I mean, the skin, because we have cells in every organ, something leads these cells to start behaving badly. That's really what cancer is. These cells that we have in, let's say, in the pancreas, your friend that had pancreas cancer, had cells in the pancreas. These cells in the pancreas started growing and stopped dying. And that growth led to the formation of these tumors that we were able to find on a CAT scan. And these tumors were able to metastasize elsewhere. And that's really what happens. But ultimately, that's what it is. That's the simplest way to explain what cancer is. And that's why it's very difficult to compare cancers, because what you do for pancreas cancer is different than what you do to breast cancer. So the way we approach in terms of therapy differs. And I explained that very clearly in the book.
I just come through here with you two are both incredibly knowledgeable from a science perspective. And I know that many, many years I've heard Cyndi speak, and she always asks the audience, if you were confronted with a life-threatening illness, would you change the way you live your life? And most people put their hand up, but Cyndi, correct me if I'm wrong, will turn around and say, well, as much as you say that, actually only 1 in 10 of you will actually do something about it. Why is it that we have to, one, get hit with a health crisis before we do anything? Where's the prevention and understanding it before it even occurs? And secondly, why would only 1 in 10 people actually really face this head on and seriously? What's your thoughts on this?
I have a lot of thoughts on this. So number one, I actually love the fact that Cyndi asked that question. It's very insightful. The one thing I will say is that you have to think of how human brains really think. And you're both really wonderful and knowledgeable, and you understand this. But really, a lot of people think they are invincible until something happens. That's the reality. It never happens to me. It happens to my friend or the guy next door or the girl next door. It's just the way we think. It is how many people smoke heavily like a chimney, and they tell you, I want to enjoy life. If I'm going to die a year earlier, I'll die a year earlier. And they just don't think anything's going to happen to them. And then when something happens, then all hell breaks loose. So human nature is, most humans are invincible. That's number one, until it happens. I think the second question is very, very interesting, because you're absolutely right. Most people, they don't always change behavior. And there are probably, in my opinion, This is not based on any study. This is Chadi Nabhan's opinion, by the way. I can't quote you a study for this. Number one is I don't think they know what they should do. I think there's a little bit of lack of guidance into, what do I do? And is it really going to help me after I've already got ill? Right? I mean, in a sense, so if somebody, let's say, had bad lung cancer, of course they should stop smoking. But if you were that individual, well, I mean, what's the point now? I already got the lung cancer, for example. So that's one. There's no clarity into what you do and whether if you do something at that stage is going to help, because it's no longer preventive, right? You already had something going on. Number two, I think a lot of people, when they are faced with an illness, their focus shifts into, I need to do something about it. I need to treat it right now. I'm really less interested and less focused on changing my lifestyle. I just really need to give me the treatment, give me the pill, give me the chemotherapy, give me whatever it is that you need to give me, because, I'm in a different stage right now. And yes, I can shift certain things, but that's not going to cure my illness. You're not at the stage before you get an illness. And number three, I think that we need to have more guidance into what type of changes patients could do after they become ill that are reasonable. So let me give you an anecdote. You may not agree with me on this one, but it's really, you have to think about it from a patient perspective. So imagine a scenario of a patient like we, again, Cindy's friend who unfortunately had pancreas cancer. And imagine I go and tell this patient after he's got pancreas cancer, I don't want you to eat any ice cream. I want you to avoid red meat and steak. And I want you to not eat dessert, whatever. Like I just put some very, very difficult diet restriction. Is it really the right time for someone with an awful pancreas cancer versus maybe enjoy life? Because unfortunately, we know what's going to happen with pancreas cancer. So I think these interventions are not happening early enough where people are trying to do one of these things. I believe that if you're a patient who has such a bad disease, you probably want to really enjoy a few things of life because your life expectancy is measured in months. I believe in a lot of these interventions that must occur before the illness occurs.
It's interesting. When I was talking to my neighbour, and she told me that she was on chemotherapy, that they were starting the treatment. I said to her, there's some really good evidence around the ketogenic diet that it helps with the cancer treatment and protects your healthy cells. I just kind of said that to her. And she didn't ask further questions. So my assumption was that she wasn't interested in doing that. And that's what I find. I know when I talk to somebody, maybe you could try this, and it might be able to help. But if they don't ask further questions, I figure they're just going to get through their treatment and then they'll think about it. And that's what I get. But then there are those occasional ones, like Kim and I have two friends that have both been diagnosed with glioblastomas. One has passed, and the other one has completely changed his lifestyle, completely changed everything. And he was diagnosed in January or December, was it, Kimmy? And he just had another scan, and they said he was doing, there was no growth, everything was fine. It's just, this man's now able to live and see his grandchildren, whereas our friend.
I mean, Cyndi and Kim, I mean, I think, look, the problem is that there's nothing that is 100% an absolute in science right now. I mean, we taped last year, like Kim introduced earlier, the thing about toxic exposure. Here I am, I was thinking there should be no two people who should dispute how bad glyphosate is. And guess what? There's a lot of people who dispute that, and a lot of people who would literally swear by glyphosate and everything in the US, and I'm sure in Australia as well. So there's so much of lack of consensus on a lot of things that are happening in science. I think the solution is to continue to having dialogue and ask questions and hopefully provide reasonable answers that are supported by evidence. Um, so, I think that diet and cancer is a very tricky subject because you have so many other variables beyond the diet that are ongoing with the patient. And it depends on the disease, I think is really important. So, for example, I taped a podcast on my own podcast on alcohol and cancer. And believe it or not, there's an ASCO statement, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, about alcohol and cancer. And it's attributed when you look at cancers worldwide, and I have that in the book as well under that what causes cancer. They estimate about 6% of cancers generally are caused by alcohol. There's not a lot of clarity, by the way, into what does that mean. If you have a glass of wine, a night or 3 times a week, is this alcohol that's going to cause cancer? If you have 2 beers, so it's a little bit all over the map, right? So it's a very general statement, alcohol and cancer, but it's written on the American Cancer Society, CDC, all of these things. And yet it's not something easy to implement because every so often you want to enjoy maybe a glass of wine or whatever it is. So what I've learned about life is that there are trade-offs, and we really need to be cognizant into what we are giving up for what. So if I tell you, you should never ever have a glass of wine for the rest of your life, it may not matter to you at all. Maybe you don't drink at all, and that's fine. But maybe for the gal next door, I'm like, well, I want to have a couple of glasses of wine a week. I mean, this can't be that bad. And that's what happens. I mean, when it comes to this, it's not easy. I have actually in the book literally an entire chapter because it was very difficult to write that one, I have to tell you. And the chapter was about complementary and alternative therapies. I talk about music therapy, massage therapy, pet therapy, so many other things. And, I mean, there are studies on that. I mean, there's somebody who wrote a big paper on music therapy, and I wouldn't think like anybody is spending time on that, but, it's important, like exercise, all these things. So it's not really clear what you do. And when you look at what causes cancer, I mean, are we able to make some changes? So I put in here literally alcohol. Alcohol is responsible for 6% of all cancer incidents and 4% of all cancer deaths in the United States. That's not trivial, but what do you do about it? So it's easier said than done. I think implementing these changes, you're telling patients that they need to do a lot of these changes, and how does this affect quality of life? That's an individual decision. I think it's individual decision. Long-winded answer, I think.
No, it was excellent, and I love that nothing is 100%, and there is a lack of consensus. And I agree with you. Like, one person who does, let's say, the ketogenic diet may survive, and the next person won't. And so there are lots of other factors, and I agree with you entirely. So can we continue on the cancer journey? So we now know what cancer is. What happens when someone finds out they have cancer, and what is that journey that you take them on? Because you're an oncologist and hematologist, and you've been doing this for a long time, and your studies, go from Syria to Chicago to Boston to, like, you're incredible with what you've done. So can you take us on that journey?
Yeah. It is really, it's probably look, any illness is tough. We don't want to have any disease. We are human nature. We'd like to always be healthy, but unfortunately, we're not going to live forever. So at some point, we're going to get sick, and cancer is one of these illnesses. I think patients go through a lot of phases. A healthy patient, and I describe lots of the stories. That's why I think the book will be interesting, because you'll see stories of people. Some of them you'll identify with. There are people who I've cared for who healthy, young, no family history, athletic, and they get down with a very bad illness. And the first thing is shock. Like, why is it me? I mean, what did I do wrong? And then you go through all of these phases until you accept the particular illness, and then you move into you want to actually take action about it. But what I try to describe from the beginning, which is what are the various signs and symptoms that occur that could be alarming. Then I go through the process into, like, if you go through, like, literally, just so you know, I mean, I put myself into step by step. So my first thing is, what is cancer and what causes it? Then I have a chapter 2, which is screening for cancer, which is before you get diagnosis. Then the next is symptoms and signs of cancer. Then making a diagnosis. How do you make a diagnosis? Then I spend a full chapter on the first oncology visit. What happens in that visit? How do you prepare for that visit? What do you do until you get that visit? Because you get diagnosed on Wednesday, you'd like to be seen that day because you're very, very nervous right now and anxious, but maybe the appointment is a week away. What happens during that week for you as a patient and family as you're going into complete chaos in your mind because you just got told a very serious diagnosis and you're trying to figure out you'd like to be seen right away? So the first oncology visit, and then we go over staging, trials, and various treatments and things like that. So there's a journey that usually occurs, and I try to almost take the patient's hand and say, this is what happens during the stage of signs and symptoms. This is how we stage the cancer. This is what should happen in the first oncology visit. This is what you do to prepare to the first oncology visit. This is why you should not panic. You should really be, so, because I learned so much from my patients that that's what I usually do, what I did.
When we look at this, which is so fantastic, it's such a beautiful guide. There's a couple of things I want to ask you here. Firstly, when Cyndi talks about that person who gets confronted and doesn't make the change, for a lot of people, they feel like it's an instant diagnosis, not realizing that there's probably been whispers and screams and all sorts of signs their body's been giving them leading up to that diagnosis. So for a lot of people, perhaps they turn to instant therapy because they feel like unconsciously they've instantly got it, therefore it instantly needs treating, as opposed to it could be 30 years of bad eating or bad mental health or all these sorts of things. Would you say then that part of the approach and what you talk about in here is to realize that to come from it with a bigger viewpoint, a more holistic, dare I say it, even a more spiritual viewpoint? My question to you, some healthy people may seem to get cancer, and some unhealthy people, my father-in-law, for example, is nearly 80. He has smoked all his life, taken drugs all his life, drunk all his life. He's lived a hard party life. They all call him a lovable rogue. He doesn't look very healthy right now, but it's almost, he's like a weed. You can't kill it. And it's like he just keeps going. And I'm just flabbergasted as to, in your opinion, and this may not be something to answer, do you think there's a spiritual element to this, that it's preordained, the day the book opens is the day we go, depending on choices is what will lead us to whether it's, a death by an accident or death by cancer, etc.? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I mean, there's so much that we don't know. I think that there's no question there are patients who have abused their body and lifestyle and have lived until their 80s and 90s. But you often just hear about these exceptional states, right? But the reality is most people who drink that heavy, who smoke that heavy, who don't take care of themselves, they're unlikely to live in their 80s or 90s, but you hear about them. And we would like to believe, this is usually the defense mechanism of people that don't live a healthy lifestyle. Well, my uncle had lived until his 90s and he smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day and drank a bottle of vodka every night. Well, that's probably, I don't know why, but there are other people who would not be the case. Now, why this would happen in one person versus another, it's a very interesting question, because nobody's going to dispute that tobacco is carcinogen. I mean, there's no question about it. I think there are certain elements in someone's body that may probably metabolize particular compound different than another. So you'll see maybe the nicotine affects a particular person differently than another. We know that certain cancers occur in women more than men and vice versa. Certain cancers in men more than women. Is this hormonal, for example? Is it possible that estrogen and progestin in women might really affect the development of certain cancers versus testosterone in men? Is it possibly that certain genes that exist in women versus men have a role in that? I think there are certain of these elements. I believe that we should approach cancer in a very larger, bigger view and a holistic view where we really understand everything pertaining to the patient, what matters to the patient, what is important for that patient. That dictates our approach to treatment. That dictates what we decide in a particular therapy. It should not be always just a decision of the physician. It's really a back and forth discussion. If you don't know what matters to the person in front of you and what values they hold and what's really critical to them, how could you be their partner as they go into this unfortunate journey? There are people, and I cite this in the book in some of the stories. So I had a patient, Kim and Cindy, that I'll never forget her. What a wonderful lady. But she had metastatic colon cancer. And I was caring for her for about maybe 4 years, and she was still doing okay. Things started to not do well. And I recommended a different type of therapy for her. Her daughter was a healthcare professional, and I recommended different treatment. And I told her that this treatment is going to make you lose your hair. And she looked at me. She was 80 at the time, 80 or 81. And she said, nope, I'm not going to take that. And I said, but this is really, like, I really think this is important. And you may live for 1 to 2 years if we get lucky and you get that treatment. She's like, not for me. I am not going to lose my hair. And I keep my hair appointment all the time. I'm going to come to you and I'm going to make my hair. And I don't want to live these extra years if I really don't need to. And I'm very content with that. That was her individual decision that maybe a different patient in the next room would have made a very completely different decision, because what matters to patient A is different than what matters to patient B. So our approach, to your earlier point, should be holistic, looking at the patient, their values of everything. I think spirituality is very important because it helps patients cope. It helps patients go through the rough patches. I don't personally, I don't think being spiritual or not spiritual is going to cure the disease. I think it will help you cope with the disease. And the reason I say that, honestly, is because I know many people who are completely not spiritual, who continue to live aggressively, and they're totally fine and they don't care. Vice versa, I have very nice spiritual people who unfortunately don't do well. So you see it both ways. But I think spirituality, if someone is spiritual, is going to help them cope through the rough patches, because there will be rough patches as you treat the cancer.
It's interesting that you asked that, Kim, because my husband had a brother who was diagnosed with a brain tumor back in the 70s or 80s, I think it was, 1970s, 1980s. And they didn't give him long to live. And there was a nurse at the hospital that suggested he go see a faith healer. And he went to that faith healer and the tumor disappeared. But I
You
must
went,
admit,
you went to who? You went to who? Is it?
it was called a faith healer back in the 70s and
Oh,
80s.
faith,
A
faith
faith
healer.
healer, yeah. So he goes to, and it completely disappears. There's no sign of it. But his life got a little bit hard and uncomfortable, and that tumor came back and he passed away. But I just, it's a great question to ask. And I know what you're saying. It's the individual. It's not going to work for everybody. But I just find these stories, like you said, nothing is 100%. And I just think that that's where we have to stand with cancer. I wrote an article just recently because I keep seeing bumper stickers in Australia. I don't know if you have them in America, but it's fuck cancer.
Yeah, I'm totally about, yes, fuck cancer. I like that.
Yeah, it says that. And so I wrote an article on it because I went, maybe it's not the cancer we should be swearing at. Maybe it's the lifestyle we lead, or the chemicals that, like glyphosate, that's in our environment, or the food additives that are causing health issues, or and I went through a list and I said maybe we should have that under that whole bumper sticker as opposed to just cancer, because I feel the cancer is, and I may be totally wrong because I am not the expert like you are, but I feel like it's the body's way of coping with whatever we're throwing at it. I don't know, does it isolate them? Like they talk about the Warburg effect. I don't know anything about the Warburg effect, but I keep hearing that word.
No,
What is that?
Cyndi, look, the idea that cancer is caused because there are certain lifestyle things that we actually have done that were not appropriate is absolutely correct. I mean, nobody should dispute that.
Hmm.
I do think we have to acknowledge that there are many patients that have lived a healthy lifestyle and are fine, and they still will get cancer.
Hmm.
This is not an excuse, by the way, that you should just do whatever you want. I'm just saying that what we should do as people, we should do what we can do in our control. It is in our control not to do X, Y, and Z. It is in our control to do X, Y, and Z. So that thing we can actually control. I mean, the best example I would give you, just to make it easier, because I like usually simplifying things. It is when you drive a car, you control the speed. I mean, unless there's a gun to your head to actually go fast, you have made a decision to go fast or to actually drive normally. And if, God forbid, you drive fast and you get in an accident, you can't say, well, fuck the speed limit. That's not how it works. You actually decided to speed. But have there been some car accidents that had nothing to do with speed, and you were completely following the rules and you were doing fine, and you got rear-ended by another car? Or like, these things do happen. So I'm bringing this anecdote just to explain that we should control what we can control. And if despite all of this, still things happen, then we deal with them. Unfortunately, they might still happen. And that's simple fact, because again, we're not really immortal. We just are going to get sick. Believe me, I would love for all of us to be immortal. It is something I think about a lot. It may be the subject of my third book, but I don't know how we do that. It's not really, it's just not possible. Just our cells age. As they age, certain things change, and then things just go out of normal. So I agree with you. I mean, you should not, if you've lived a very hard life and you got diagnosed with an illness, you're the person to blame. But it is never a good idea to ever blame a patient. This is not the time to blame the patient. When a patient gets diagnosed with cancer, and I've had this with some wives and husbands, you come in, the patient has lung cancer, and the wife is saying, well, how many times have we told you not to smoke? Are you happy right now? And she's lecturing him at the worst time possible. And I'm trying to say, you know what? It's probably not the right time. because right now we need to focus on getting and then as a patient, you're getting that guilt thing is sinking in. That guilt, you failed your family, you failed your loved ones, you failed your children. And if they're yelling at you and upset with you because they love you and you're going to lose you, it actually is double whammy for you as the individual who's receiving this. Not only you got the cancer, you get the treatment, but you're also being blamed by your loved ones that you are the reason that you brought this misery upon them. So there's so much of that psychology. And I think the stories I bring in the book is based on everything I've seen. I've seen it all. So I try to put it in a very concise way so at least people understand that this unfortunately could be us.
I think the reality is that we have to accept that at some point there's another line. Cindy's seen that bumper sticker. I also get told when I'm trying to teach things about health is, oh, you're going to die of something. And it's that attitude of, that you were just saying, it's important that we give it our best opportunity, our best chance to survive.
Totally.
One thing that I'm curious about, and I might be completely off target here.
You're never completely off. You're never completely off.
Plants and humans seem to have a very powerful symbiotic relationship. We can't survive without plants. Plants could probably survive without us, no doubt. But plants provide us with medicine. They provide us with so much. Do plants get cancer?
Question.
Oh, she's stumping me. I don't know the answer to that.
What about that thing that grows off a tree?
I need to Google that now.
Good question, Kimmy.
That's a good question. Wait a minute. Well, oh my goodness.
She does this all the time. She stumps me.
I know. I know. She was. Oh boy, that was a tough one.
While you're looking that up,
yeah,
I have a little story about the fact that you said you cannot blame the patient, and we can only control what we can control. And your book about the glyphosate. To me, we can only control what we can control. And my mother died of lung cancer, mesothelioma. They said that it was. And my mum lived the best life, didn't she, Kim? Like, she ate the best foods. She did everything organically. She did her exercise. She did everything right. She did breath work. She was time outside. But she was exposed to toxic levels of DDT from the time she was nearly 5 right through to when she left America in the 20s, when she was in her 20s. So you're right, she did everything right. And everybody said that to me. Oh, see, your mum did everything right and she gets cancer. And
here's the answer that you should tell them.
Okay, tell me.
If anybody ever says that, because this is usually common, first of all, everybody is going to get sick at some point, heart disease, whatever it is. So that's like a very silly argument for the people who are opposing the good lifestyle. Your answer to them should be, yes, she did get cancer, but the reason she lived healthy until that age was because she actually lived a healthy lifestyle. If she didn't, she'd have gotten it much earlier and much sooner. That's number one. Number two is patients who are healthy and live a healthy lifestyle, they tolerate treatment much better. They're able to withstand therapy, and they are likely going to live longer after being diagnosed than people who are not healthy. I mean, just imagine, again, I'm not suggesting that Kim's father-in-law is going to get cancer, but God forbid if he does, imagine how difficult it is going to treat him, because his body is frail. No matter what, you give him any particular therapy, it is not going to be easy. He's unlikely to tolerate it, and it's probably going to be very bad downhill. So living healthy is almost you're saving money in the bank. You're putting that money in the bank. You may not need to spend it today, but there will be a time where you need to spend it. And your mom was lucky to spend it at the right time.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you, because my sister was also exposed to that DDT, and she lived a really unhealthy lifestyle. She smoked right up until a year before. Well, the day she was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, she just went, oh, I better stop smoking. And she only lived until her 40s. My mum lived to nearly 70. So I agree with you entirely. And thank you for making that more clear to me, because sometimes I do go, oh, well, but thank
It is
you.
literally like putting money in the bank, and that's
Yeah,
really what you have to say. It's, you know, could you spend your money everything today? Yes, but the reason people save and everything, because we
yeah.
could all have a bad day, and you have some money to use, and so it's your savings account, and the best savings account you could have is your health.
It's interesting because he has got cancer. He's had many, many strokes. He's had an aneurysm. He's got bowel cancer. Like, seriously, as much as I say he's like a weed, I wouldn't want to live the way he's living. He's living to die, it almost seems. And something like pneumonia may take him out because he hasn't got the strength in
Sure.
order to do this. Also, my husband's grandmother, she had 3 different types of cancer. Now, she was a big party girl and a beautiful social creature, which I feel like her social lifestyle and her ability to connect and the loving, funny person she was is also what gave her longevity. However, that cancer, her last 10 years of her life was like, it was horrible. And I think what you're saying is, by investing in our health, at least if we're confronted with an illness, 1, it might not last as long. 2, we get over it. 3, we cope with the treatment better. Or 4, we may heal from it altogether and still have longevity, a healthy longevity ahead of us. In your humble opinion, then, we can see people say cancer is not always, it's not choosy. It picks anybody and it can seem like it's random. What then, in your book, you're talking about things. What are some of the preventative, let's talk about before we get the diagnosis. So what is some of the key things that you're recommending before this even occurs?
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I try to put this in literally right away in terms of what causes the cancer, and maybe there's an opportunity to make certain things. It's very really difficult. I actually really I put here in one of the paragraphs, I said it's unreasonable to list all potential causes for all cancers, since we don't know causations for many, and etc. But I talk about certain things that we can control, because we have certain things in our control. I think tobacco is a big one. I think we know that. I do think alcohol. Um, I did talk about, it's not linked to all cancers, but it should be hopefully minimized as much as possible. I talk about obesity. I think obesity, some cancers are linked to obesity. So I do talk about maintaining a healthy lifestyle, proper diet, and exercise should help reduce many diseases, including some cancers. So the thing is, some cancers are linked, like certain cancers are linked to obesity, others are not. But nobody should argue that living a healthy lifestyle and being in shape and exercising and having good diet is really important. I talk about sun exposure. I know it's very difficult in Australia, but UV light and sun exposure are really things that could obviously people can avoid and prevent tanning beds and things like that. There are certain other things that we may not have a lot of control over. I mean, viruses, bacteria, certain viruses. Sometimes cancers that could occur from prior treatments. So you can have a cancer, you get treatment for that cancer, and then you develop cancer from the treatment that you received from the other cancer. And then family histories, sometimes we have no control, right? I mean, you just were born into the family you were born at, and there are certain genetic factors, maybe a gene that was inherited or things like that. And I think knowing the family history is critical. And then I talk about environmental factors. I think we need to be careful about pesticides, herbicides. I mean, Roundup and glyphosate is an example of this, but there's so many other environmental factors that we don't even study very well, because usually, I mean, there are political reasons not to study these, and there are non-political reasons, usually funding and money. If you're a government and you have to allocate money to study certain things, you start looking, well, where should I study? Maybe you study other factors as opposed to this. So I think these are all things that in our control, and we should try to work on them.
And do plants get cancer?
Well, I mean, I went to Dr. Google. Let me tell you, I mean, I'm sure that many of the listeners right now are doing the same. And there's like something here on
like all the things you just said then, apart from, I mean, tobacco is a plant. They are exposed to sun all the time. They must get different viruses and bacteria. And there's perhaps a genetic, and there's the environment. They get attacked with glyphosate and all sorts.
Yeah. So it says here, plants can experience the same phenomena. So it says here, in animals, a tumor develops when a cell or group of cells loses the built-in controls that regulate its growth, which we talked about earlier. Often as a result of mutations, plants can experience the same phenomena, along with cancerous masses, but it tends to be brought on via infection. Fungi, bacteria, viruses, and insect infestation have all been tied to plant cancers. Oak trees, for example, often grow tumors that double as homes for larvae. And so anyway, I mean, apparently the good news for plants is that even though they've been susceptible to cancer, they're less vulnerable to its effects, as an example. So I learned something today.
It makes sense to me that we use plants and herbs as a part of our healing process, that we could turn to nature. I know I've got a friend who's got a PhD in plant physiology, and when we looked at different skincare things with UVF protection, what we noticed was that I asked him, how does a plant, if you put an indoor plant outside, it will burn until it gradually adapts to the level of exposure of sun it gets. We're a bit the same. If we get little amounts, often we build up a more resilient effect to the sun exposure. But when you look at it from the perspective of chemo and different types of treatments that we do, it certainly must be an individual choice, and yet people get knocked if they choose not to do the chemos or the drug therapies or different things. We even have a famous model here in Australia, Elle Macpherson, who has just recently publicly shared that she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And in her book, she chose to go the alternate or the complementary route. And the ABC has put it all over socials, the most irresponsible comments ever from Elle Macpherson. This is totally wrong. Chemotherapy is the only way. It's pretty hard to stand out and do something different when governments and major network media channels are against that opinion. What's your thoughts then about the individual's choice? I know you're for it, but how do you get up against that with fear?
Yeah, I am for individual choice. Look, I mean, it is people have to do what they want to do. However, they need to be well informed. I think that is really key. So it is ultimately your choice as my patient, but it is my responsibility to explain to you fully and articulate to you clearly what the disease is, what the choices are, what are the trade-offs, what would you expect if you receive chemotherapy, what would you expect if you don't receive chemotherapy, what would you expect if you do X, Y, and Z, and then I think it's ultimately your choice. What I don't condone is I don't think people should make choices without being well informed. I mean, like in anything, right? Again, I mean, try to simplify anything. I mean, let's say you want to invest your money somewhere and you talk to an investment consultant. Ultimately, it's your money. Ultimately, you have to decide where to invest. But the consultant is telling you, these are your choices. This is what you could do possibly. You're buying a home. You could see, you tell the realtor the type of houses that you want, and then you make an informed decision which house to buy, because after you see all of the houses. So as long as she was explained to what the trade-offs are, what is right, what is wrong, I think.
But Chadi, she is quite well renowned for her research. She was dating a very well renowned holistic integrative doctor for a while, so I dare say she was. But herein lies the other thing then. Based on your values and your beliefs, you could do all the research in the world based on those values and beliefs and find everything to support that. you can have a different set of values and beliefs and find a whole lot of data and science to support that belief. So even then, we saw it through COVID. Top, well-qualified, educated professors completely fighting each other on the narrative. So you say do be well-informed, but for many people, based on their values and beliefs, will be informed based on their values and beliefs, not necessarily the whole picture.
What you're highlighting, actually, Kim, is what we call confirmation bias, right? It is you seek the information that aligns with your values, and you believe this information, and that's really the definition of confirmation bias. I think that ultimately, what I also explain in the book is that at some point you have to have a trust in the person who is managing your disease. You do your due diligence, you do your research, whatever it is. But at some point, you need to come to a point, and you can get second opinions, everything. At some point, you have to come to a grip into this is the guy or this is the gal that's going to be my partner in this journey. And I put my trust in that person. And the reason that's important, as I explain, is because there will be a lot of bumps in the roads. There will be a lot of triumphs and bumps, and you have to have trust in that person because not all the days will be good. If you trust that individual, the hope is that this individual and you can come up to the best decision that aligns with your values, and you don't want to really make that decision in vacuum. Ultimately, there's obviously science into why cancer develops. There are mutations that occur. There are genetics, genes and DNA and RNA that gets really affected. This is well known. There are particular mutations that evolve, and we treat these mutations. We don't know why they occur all the time. Environment could cause them. Glyphosate could cause them. But ultimately, if there's a particular mutation, you have to treat it. I mean, there's an actual science into why cancer develops. And there are times where you need to treat that exact thing and target that with a particular medication or things like that, in addition to other things that you're doing. And I have an entire chapter on complementary therapy and alternative therapy, because I think it's one of the most common questions that get asked. Actually, one of my longest chapters, it's called Complementary and Alternative Therapies. I think what sometimes people do is they feel they want to replace the cancer treatment with something completely different. And my sense is that there's room for both, depending on the cancer. So some physicians are very against any type of non-traditional therapy, and I don't agree with that, because I think there's lots of value to additional treatments that patients really seek. And as long as you have a conversation about the pros and cons, it's actually great. But at the same time, also some patients are completely against any type of traditional therapy. And I think that's problematic, because many of the traditional therapies have cured people, and there are so I think there's room for both, and I think it's important to make sure that with the right balance. An example I could tell you that I'll never forget, because it was an actress I was in love with growing up, Farah Faust, who was she acted in Charlie's Angels. She was
one of the Charlie's Angels.
One of Chadi's Angels,
Yeah,
Farah Faust.
Farrah Fawcett Majors, yes.
I was in love with her growing up as a teenager, and she died from one of the most curable cancers out there, because she refused we cured that cancer in over 90% of cases, like 90% with chemotherapy and radiation. I've never lost a patient with this cancer, but she refused to get treatment, and she died ultimately from the disease. So we have to, I think it's important to recognize that lots of the traditional therapies have cured a lot of patients. There is room to add some complementary therapy. I think there is room for this. I struggle with the idea when patients say, I'm going to completely take something alternative, because alternatives means you're replacing something we know could cure you and help you with something completely different. And that's very risky proposition.
Can I give an example of our two friends that I told you about with the glioblastoma?
Yeah.
So her neurologist, one of our friends' neurologists said to her, if you were my mother, I would tell you, and he is very alternative. He does the ketogenic diet and he's very alternative. He said, but if you were my mother, I would, and she was in her 70s, I would suggest you do chemo and radiation. But she did everything alternative, didn't she, Kimmy? She tried everything alternative. Whereas the gentleman, who's in his 60s, he chose to do the chemo and the radiation. So she's passed, but also alternative. So he's done what you have said. He's done traditional. And you know what? He's coping with that chemo and radiation incredibly well. It blows my mind. I see him and he's still running around. He's on his third round, I think. And he sounds tired every now and then, but for the most part,
That's a tough disease. It's a tough disease. It's probably one of the diseases we have not made much progress with, unfortunately, glioblastoma. I wish him all the best. It's going to be tough because I don't know how long this will last.
He's having a good life though. He's going between his children. They've all got their children, and he is having the best time. And that's the life that he's chosen.
And that's what,
yeah.
That's what.
And I take my hat off to him because he's not feeling sick. He's keeping his energy up, and yeah. But exactly what you said. We've got that sitting right with us. We're seeing this all the time. So it's
Chadi,
good.
can I ask you, based on what Cyndi's been saying and everything, based on the fact that we are lucky to live in this day and age with choice, science and medicine doesn't always necessarily get it right either. My grandmother was told to start smoking by her medical practitioner when Granddad went to war as a form of relaxation. So my question to you is, how quickly is science advancing, and how open are doctors and medical practitioners and specialists like yourself open to other possibilities of treatment?
And by the way, Kim, if you look in the history, in the archives of many like hospital rounds and things like that, you will see doctors smoking in rounds in the hospital wards. There's actually one time I was giving a lecture, and one of the pictures I had was a patient who was in the hospital room on an oxygen tank and smoking a cigarette, and the doctor is like giving him the match. So yes, I think that. Science is evolving faster now than before, because we know more about cancer than we have ever known before. And I think that really happened after the Human Genome Project, and we were able to sequence the human genome in 2003, over 20 years ago. So suddenly we sequenced the human genome and we started knowing that in particular diseases, there are certain genetic alterations, and pharmaceutical companies and drug companies usually are driven by profit, but essentially, if you have a genetic mutation and you develop a drug against that mutation, you should be able to hopefully stop the cancer from growing. And there are many examples of lung cancer, for example, advances and things like this. So we're starting to see a little bit more rapidity, but your point is well taken that change takes a lot of time, and physicians are in general more of a lot of physicians are, I would call, laggards. We're not really always easy to take innovation and really run with it because we were brought up in certain mindset, and it takes a lot to change this mindset. I am more optimistic now that we are seeing more changes and more progress and more advances, but it's never really fast enough, and it's never really to a degree that we want it as fast as possible for patients.
Chadi, we absolutely adore you. I could listen to your voice all day, but we've taken up enough of your time. I would suggest everybody get this cancer journey, especially if they are going through it, and maybe they'll get, and even before, so that we understand, what the consequences of it are, as well as looking at everything else that you write about. I've also believed that toxic exposure is very important for people to read, as as you know, I believe glyphosate is a real issue, as I did DDT, as we now know. So I want to thank you for your time on behalf of Kim and I, for your incredible knowledge, for your amazing voice, for your time, and everything. And when there's another book out, we want to be first up. Talk, or if you have any other topics, we love talking to you. We think you're amazing.
Thank you. It's available on audio if you want to listen to me.
Oh, good. Chadi, can you just tell us, just so that we will put it in the show notes, but for people to follow you, your socials and your website, could you just give us that too?
Oh, sure. So I'm on Twitter at Chadi Nabhan, at ChadiNabhan. I actually have an Instagram account and I follow you. It's Chadi_healthcare unfiltered. And my website is chadinabhan.com. I need to do a lot of updates to it. I have a podcast called Healthcare Unfiltered, where I talk about general healthcare topics. So some of the topics I have actually are alternative therapies. I did keto diet. I did a lot of these things. So you'll see some topics that you like. And the book is actually available anywhere by, hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and audio. I actually just also created a TikTok account. Somebody told me I need to have a TikTok account and I have no idea what I'm doing. Let me tell you, I am completely not Gen Z, whatever that Gen of TikTok. I need to have like a 10-year-old to show me what to do with TikTok.
And you need a broadcast channel too on Instagram. That's the other thing, that we get to see you on a daily basis, seeing what you're doing.
I'm trying to figure out how to do this Instagram. I think I'm not really sure how to do it, but I'm going to post a video on the book, and hopefully some people can amplify it and see what happens.
You're amazing. We love you.
Hopefully we might have you out here in Australia speaking. You never know. Yeah,
I would love to. It would be an honor.
Yeah, I'll put your name forward with this amazing society that's bringing out some incredible speakers from the US. They brought out Peter McCullough, I think. And they brought out some quite amazing speakers. So, and it's usually medical doctors that are thinking a little bit differently, because we can all listen to a doctor that's been educated and, they diagnose and they treat, but it's very different when we're talking to people like you who are thinking outside the square a little bit, or a great bit, I should say. Yeah.
And of course, it may be very important, Chadi, that Cyndi and I pay you a visit personally. I'm just saying.
Oh,
just might
you are
be really
always
important.
Welcome. You are always welcome. Always welcome. Would love to.
You're amazing. We love you. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.